Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have Lucas on a Grixis Delver build. Put up some great results with lately. Versus me on camera playing Cephalid Breakfast. A deck that doesn't seem to be played by anyone else. I don't get it. I think the deck is absolute fire. You have a turn 1 Shuko facing off against a turn 1 Delver of Secrets. See which card is better. Delver scopes out the top of the library, but does not cooperate, just swinging for 1. Now we see why Lucas is in Grixis, really valuing Baleful Strix right now, as well as a couple of other cards that require some black mana. But Baleful Strix, primarily the main thing, does line up well versus Murktides and other opposing aggressive creatures while drawing a card and being blue, capable of pitching to Force of Will. Now, Cavern of Souls is actually making this Cephalid uncounterable, and Baleful Strix is never going to get a chance to block, as this is all about milling your entire library. Cavern can name Wizard. That's going to make both Cephalid and Thassa's Oracle uncounterable when you're casting them. Of course, Thassa's Oracle typically entering the battlefield from the graveyard via Dread Return. So for those unfamiliar during sideboarding here, Cephalid Illusionist, as you can see, whenever he's targeted, you're going to mill the top 3 cards of your library, and you just keep targeting over and over again with Shuko or with Nomads and Core, milling yourself out and winning with Dread Return. You also get some extra backup thanks to Cabal Therapy, as those go into the bin, and you've got enough Narcomoebas to have bodies on board for flashback, pretty much everything. And that is it. Just how you draw it up. Turn 1, Peace. Turn 2, uncounterable Cephalid. That is going to outrace most of the format. Considering the mulligan here. Get that turn 1 Delver. And a turn 1 Shuko again. Now, in all honesty, the turn 1 Shuko really is only good when you've got the Cephalid to go along with it. Typically, you're going to be digging otherwise. If you are playing against Cephalid Breakfast, there's a good chance see a turn 1 Shuko or Nomad in core. That means that they've got the Cephalid. Otherwise, they'd be typically better off using Brainstorm or Ponder to dig and try and find what they need. Dragon Rage Channeler. Kind of like a very compact Sylvan library. Every time Lucas plays a instant or sorcery out of his deck, non-creature spell, he might have some artifacts in there like Null Rod. That type of effect is going to add up over time as you continually get to decide on the card quality. Surveil, usually going to be pretty greedy, though it can slow down and ensure that the Delver of Secrets flips, for example, if that is an instant or sorcery. Even if you don't necessarily want to be casting that instant or sorcery, may be worth it just to get that Delver to flip. Increase the speed of the clock. Force with Force back, pitching, Murktide. And this is looking very good for Delver, exactly where they want to be. Sculpting the hand. Wouldn't mind a few extra cards in hand. Aggressive Iteration would be phenomenal. Pushing through 4 damage at a time. Once that Dragon Rage flips, things will close out very quickly. Brainstorm, just one of the best cards in the game, gets eaten by a Pyroblast. This stage with 2 bad cards in hand, Brainstorm would have effectively been Ancestral Recall. Turning a Cauldron Complete and a Cabal Therapy to better cards. Though Therapy Actually, I think Therapy's terrible because the Underground Sea got wastelanded earlier. There's only one black source in the deck, so Therapy might as well be a Pokemon card at this point if it's in your hand. If it can get milled into the graveyard, that's another story, but from your hand, there's no chance to get it there. You're not going to be going to discard anytime soon. Game will be over far before then. Nomads. Shows up. Got a couple of different ways to combo with the Cephalid if he does arrive. Yuko and Nomads. Storm. We see that Null Rod in hand for Lucas, so he can shut down the Shuko. The Brainstorm. One of my favorite cards in the game of Magic. So glad there's a place where we actually get to play the best cards in the history of the game. I think that's the core identity of Legacy. You hear some salt on occasion about Brainstorm and Daze. There needs to be some place where you can play those cards. Really don't like them. There is Modern, Pioneer, Kitchen Table, tons and tons of options, but Pyroblast. Oh, and look at this beautiful synergy here. Pyroblast. So he actually has Pyro and Red Blast. Red Elemental Blast would not have worked there. So let's nerd out about this for a second. So Pyroblast, as you can see, counters a spell or destroys a permanent if it is blue, whereas Red Elemental Blast counters a blue spell or destroys a blue card in play. So that actually would not have worked. He was able to play a card, surveil, put the necessary card type into the graveyard to swing for lethal, whereas if that was a Red Elemental Blast, he wouldn't have been able to play it without destroying his own Delver. That was the only legal target for Red Elemental Blast, whereas Pyroblast can target any permanent. It just won't destroy it unless it's blue. I would probably just play all Pyroblasts in my list, though if I did have Underground Sea, I probably would have named Pyroblasts and never would name Red Elemental Blast in that context, so I still think it's correct to just play the Pyroblasts, but everybody, I mean, it's so marginal. But that was absolutely a win on the spot, which wouldn't have happened if it was a Red Elemental Blast instead of Pyro. My deck building consideration is making sure that you have the most synergy within your own deck rather than looking for kind of metagame considerations. For example, playing around Cabal Therapy or Meddling Mage by splitting things up. Generally not going to do that. I'll just play the thing that is objectively the most powerful in my 75. That's just been my approach. Let me know if you disagree with that, if you like to play those games and potentially have extra points versus the Meddling Mage decks. Got a Null Rod to shut down Shuko. Still very unhappy with the way that Null Rod works. Abeyance and Null Rod both worded exactly the same, but they do not function the same. They're from the same set, same wording. The cards do not operate the same way. Only example of Power Level Errata, one of the only that we have. Fix that by making Abeyance work the same way as Null Rod. Be a shame to neuter Null Rod and make it work the same way as Abeyance. Not stop mana abilities. Null Rod got handled by Prismatic Ending. New sideboard card for me. And quite strong. We have a Cephalid Illusionist ready to pick up this artifact and mill out for the win. What will Lucas have for responses? Got a K command, which would be an absolute blowout if this resolves, destroying both the artifact and the Cephalid. Triggers hits a Narcomoeba. And Daze. Absolutely brutal. Yep. Yeah, Daze does certainly love to punish the top of the curve there. 3-mana spell, stopped with Daze, and now milling out, finding Cabal Therapy, sacrificing that Narcomoeba, and we'll see the rest of the hand. The game is up. Going to be either things that can be played or not. Yeah, Daze, but still with 1 mana open, so that's blank. Nothing else is really going to work there. We see that there was the potential to use Brazen Borrower to respond by bouncing the Cephalid. That could have bought an extra turn, and anything can happen from there. But Daze absolutely stopping what would have been a spectacular play from Grixis Delver.